Hi there everybody, my name's Tristan Scroggins and I'm a mandolin player based in Nashville, Tennessee. I toured professionally for about 10 years with a band called Jeff Scroggins in Colorado. Jeff is my dad. I was one of the recipients of the 2018 IBMA Momentum Award for Instrumentalist of the Year, and this last year I was part of the John Hartford Fiddle Tune Project, Volume 1, which is currently nominated for a Grammy. Instead of showing you something on the mandolin, I thought I'd show you something a little more universal and a jam skill that really helped me out when I first started learning to play. That's how to read guitar chords. So what I mean by that is that I'm going to teach you how to recognize what chords are being played by how they look when somebody is playing them on the guitar. This way you can tell what chords are being played while the song is happening, so you don't have to memorize it before the song, or if somebody doesn't stop and explain, you can just kind of figure it out on the fly. Now, we usually talk about guitar chords probably just because they're pretty universal. People use almost always the exact same shapes when they're playing guitar chords, and guitar players also use capos, which change what the open strings are, so the shape of the chord stays the same. But I'll talk more about that in a minute. For now, let's just look at a couple of the most basic shapes. The first three that we're going to look at are G, C, and D. First one will be a G chord. So I want you to look at my left hand here and sort of get this shape in your head. You can see it's kind of a long shape. It's kind of long this way. It's mostly over the 3rd fret, so it's I think of it sort of like a horizontal sort of line. Sometimes people will play it without, they'll play it something like this, or, you know, but it's usually some variation of this line. So that's a G chord, and so you can play that on your instrument if you want, or just wait. Now, a C chord. It'll be this, or some variation of this. Sometimes it's like that. But the thing to remember about it is that it's this kind of diagonal line. You see that, how the fingers move in this sort of diagonal motion. And now for a D chord. Now this is sort of, I always thought of it as like a cluster of these fingers, and it's sort of, it's a triangle really. It's 2, 3, 2, but it's these 3 fingers here together. And notice where they are in proximity of the fretboard too. They're sort of in this region, towards the thinner strings. So this is the D chord. So again, the G chord is this long chord, and then this diagonal one is a C chord, and then this clustered one is a D chord. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play those chords, and I'll call them out the first time, and then I'll do it again, but I won't call them out, and I want you to try to play along and see if you can follow along just by watching the shapes that my hands are making. So let's start. 1, 2, 3, G. Now I'm going to go to C. Now I'm going to go to D. Now back to G. Now I'm going to do it again. Now I'm going to do it again, but I'm not going to do the bass notes, so you won't hear where I'm going. How'd you do with that? A lot of the songs that we play in Bluegrass, they have a pretty standard sort of structure that you could map out. They're usually like 16 measures and usually 8 measure sections, and those are broken up into, you're usually playing chords for a certain amount of time on each of them, but that's like a lot of stuff to try to figure out, especially when you're first starting to learn. So just being able to sit near a guitar player or even across from a guitar player in a jam and see their hands, you can sort of follow along with what's being played. So now let's talk about some other chords and ideas. I mentioned before that guitar players use capos a lot, and I'm going to try to explain how that works and how that'll work for you for reading guitar chords. If you play the guitar or even the banjo, you're probably familiar with how a capo works, so this explanation is maybe more if you play the mandolin or you play the fiddle or bass. If I strummed all of these strings open right now, that's what it would sound like. And I could take a finger and put them over all the strings and cover them if I wanted to. But this capo will do that for me. So this is a capo, and the most basic way to understand it is that it makes notes higher. And what I mean by that, this E is just the open E string. I'm not fretting anything, I'm not using my fingers. But if I put my finger on the 2nd fret, this is a higher note now. This is an F sharp note. Now when I'm playing a chord like a G chord, you can see that I'm using all 4 fingers, but there are 6 strings on this guitar, so there's a few open strings. So if I wanted to play a higher chord, like an A chord, if I just moved my fingers up, it wouldn't work because I have these open strings, and those need to be higher also. What the capo does is that it acts like an extra finger. So if I wanted to play an A chord, I could take that G chord and move it up 2 frets, and I could put this capo on the 2nd fret, and it's going to change all those notes to be higher, and now I can play an A chord because it's fretting these lower notes. So what that means is that if somebody has their capo on the 2nd fret, all the chords that they're playing are going to be 2 half steps higher. And you can get into the music theory of that. Right now I'll just go through really quickly the more common places you're going to see it and explain it. So right now my capo's on the 2nd fret. I'm going to play the shape that I played before for a G chord, but now it's going to be an A chord. Notice it's the same shape. We got this long shape. Now we're going to do our C shape. It's diagonal, but this is D. This is a D chord because our capo is on the 2nd fret. Now this clustered shape here, before that was D, now this is E because our capo is on the 2nd fret. So we have A, D, E. Does that make sense? We have A, D, and E. So I'm going to play just really quickly, and I'll use passing notes, but I won't say what chords I'm playing. Once again, it's A, D, and E. 1, 2, 3, and... I kind of threw you a curveball there on purpose by starting with the D chord, or our C shape, instead of the A chord. So you can go back and play along with that one now that it won't be a surprise if it caught you too off guard. If it didn't catch you off guard, great job. Great, just watch those shapes. So in bluegrass, sometimes you'll also hear people play in like B or B flat a lot. So that would be like third. A capo on the 3rd fret, you would have B flat, E flat, and F. Most of the time, I mean, so people would do this if you're playing in B flat. You'll also see the capo on the 3rd fret if a song is in the key of F, because then you can play F out of this D position. But that's a whole different video. You also see people in B sometimes. So here's B. That's B, E, and F sharp, because the capo's on the 4th fret. Sometimes, not as often, you'll see people come up to the 5th fret here, and that makes it so that this shape is now playing a C chord, an F chord, and a G chord. Now this would be for the key of C, but sometimes people will play the key of C without a capo, and we already know these other positions here for C and G, but for F, let's look at that shape, because it's a little bit confusing. So this is C, and we talked about that, and sometimes it can be this, it's just this diagonal shape. But here's F. See how it's almost exactly the same? I mean, if we're talking about diagonal here, It's the same diagonal. It's sort of hard to catch on to. You're going to have to kind of use your ear more to hear the difference there. But you can also see that this is a little bit further this way on the neck. It's a little bit further towards the ground. So that's C and F. So if somebody was playing in the key of C in the open position, we'd have our C. And then they'd probably go to F. And then they're going to go to G. And then back to C. Now, there's a couple other chords I want to show you in the open position. We could go on for a long time talking about them, but I just kind of want to give you an overview. So here's another one. Here's the A chord. Now, you won't hear this too often, but it does come up. And so notice how it's like this cluster, but it's a little different. I want you to notice the difference between this is D and this is A. The difference in the shape of my left hand. D, these clusters, and A. They're a little closer together, they're just a little closer together. A. Sometimes you'll see guitar players do this weird A. If they're doing something weird like this, it's probably A. And sometimes you'll hear an A minor, and that just looks like this. Notice it's just kind of, it's similar, it's just a little bit different. We got our first finger up here. And then sometimes you'll see E, not as common. Notice it's the same shape as this A minor, it's just moved over. But it's over here, it's on this, in this corner, this upper left hand, I guess, corner of the fretboard. And sometimes you'll have an E minor, and that's going to be something like that, usually. And you'll hear that pretty often, actually. That's your 6 minor for playing in G. So you'll get your Foggy Mountain Breakdown, your Cherokee Shuffle, those sorts of things. So I'm going to put my capo on the 2nd fret now, so you'll remember that changes the G shape into an A. I'm also going to play, I'll show you really quick those chords, the new chords in A. So we have A, D, and E. So that A shape from before, this is now B. And then B minor, and then our E shape is now going to be F sharp or F sharp minor. So let's try to play a little bit with this A, and I'll try to throw in a few of those other chords and see if you can follow along. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So I know that was a lot to follow along with. You can move the video back and try to follow along. I was doing G shape, so A chord, D, and then I went down to this B major, then the E, and then back to the G, and then to the 6 minor, so in this case that's an F sharp minor, and then to D, E, A. So let's try in a different place. I'll go back. We'll just go back down here to the open. We'll try not worry too much about the B flat and the B. It doesn't come up. It comes up in some jams. It's sort of a regional thing. It didn't really come up a lot where I grew up playing. We mostly played in A and D and G and things like that. But we'll try to do a little bit of stuff in C. And so then we'll get to throw in that F chord. But we'll also probably get to throw in that A minor chord. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. catch that A minor. So those are all the explanations for the chords. This next part of the video I'm going to leave in case you want to come back to this video and just see me play every chord with the name on the screen. I'll leave that here for reference. So I'll go through all of them right now. If you don't want to see it, you can skip ahead to the end. So with no capo on, here are the shapes. G, long shape. C, diagonal shape. D, clustered shape. A, tighter cluster shape. A minor, like A but different. E major, just over in this corner. And then E minor, just these two strings. Now, capo on the second fret. We have A, D, diagonal shape, E, and then we have B, B minor, F sharp, F sharp minor. So then for our third fret, this is usually going to be like B flat, because we start with B flat, E flat, F, and then we have C, C minor, G major, G minor. And then we move the capo to the fourth fret, and we have B, E, F sharp, and then we would have C sharp, C sharp minor, G sharp, G sharp minor. Now for good measure, let's just check out the 5th fret here, capo on the 5th fret. We have C, F, G, and then we would have D, D minor, A minor for that. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful, and thank you for supporting Bluegrass Unlimited. It's a really important institution in our community, and it's a really easy thing to support if you have the means. It's not very expensive as far as magazine subscriptions go, and you get plugged in right into what's going on in the music. Like I said before, I'm mostly a mandolin player. I'm just showing you some stuff on the guitar today. But even though I don't tour, I still record a lot of music, and you can find a lot of it out on the internet. The #1 place to go to find stuff from me would be my website, tristanscroggins.com. I also have social media pages. I don't have Twitter, but I have Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and I upload lots of videos, mostly of me playing tunes that I've learned. I like learning classic bluegrass tunes and old-time tunes. I like teaching those tunes as well. Earlier this year, I started a Patreon page. I use the Patreon as a platform to teach the tunes that I learned for myself. I transcribe all the tunes, and then we have lessons and live stream mandolin workshops and things like that. It's very affordable. You can join for as little as $3 really, but $5 you start getting the transcriptions, and it only goes up to $20. But at $20, especially now, because you get access to everything from the past. So now there's like 100 tune transcriptions. Plus I've done a bunch of transcriptions of classic bluegrass albums like Manzanita or the Lonesome River Band's Carrying the Tradition album. A couple dozen lessons up there. I really like using Patreon as a platform for teaching because it allows me to offer content that I would normally have to charge a lot more money for, but because there's so many people participating in it, I can offer more at a lower price. It's kind of like Groupon, but for artists. I also sell transcription books. I wrote a book earlier this year called Old Time Fiddle Tune Favorites. It's mostly a melody book that has the just basic melody to a bunch of really standard old-time tunes for mandolin players who are interested in getting into old-time music. I'm getting ready to put out another one. I don't know if it'll be out by the time this video comes out, but it'll be about just standard bluegrass jam tunes that you hear a lot. And so you can check that out at my Bandcamp page, tristanscroggins.bandcamp.com. And there you can also find an album I made a couple years ago now called Fancy Boy that is all cross-picking. I do a lot of cross-picking mandolin, and I came up with these fun little cross-picking arrangements, and I just made a little EP. I also put out a record this year with a duo project I have called Scroggins and Rose. Alyssa Rose is a great violinist based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and her and I have done a couple CDs together now. This one is a collection of instrumental music that we wrote specifically for mandolin and violin, and we recorded it in this really beautiful church here in Nashville, and we're really proud of how it turned out. It's similar to like Mike Marshall and Daryl Anger's stuff, if you're into that, or Strength in Numbers. It's this kind of sort of classical bluegrass crossover, but it's definitely leans a little more bluegrass, I think, at least at times. You can find that at scrogginsandrose.bandcamp.com. And I think that's all the stuff that I'm selling right now, so if you want to check any of that out, please feel free. It's very helpful to me, and I appreciate the support, and keep supporting Bluegrass Unlimited. Thanks so much.